What if the real power wasn't behind the man you expected? What if it belonged to the woman you almost forgot? Because tonight, while the headlines may have Donald Trump's name written all over them, the fingerprints on his comeback might just belong to Melania. For years, she's been portrayed as the silent figure, the poised, distant first lady who preferred privacy over power. But now, leaks, reports, and quiet insider confirmations are revealing something different, something deliberate. Behind the scenes, Melania Trump has been moving carefully and strategically, and according to some insiders, decisively. Not just as a supportive spouse, but as the architect of Donald Trump's return to prominence. Yes, they're calling it the Melania Blueprint. And if you believe what's being whispered inside the campaign war rooms, her influence isn't symbolic anymore. It's structural. She's choosing which donors to meet, which appearances he should skip, and even which public battles he should fight or walk away from. And that's the part no one saw coming. Because while the cameras focused on the rallies, Melania was rebuilding the empire one quiet conversation at a time. It's a reversal that almost no one in politics predicted. A power shift wrapped in elegance, operating behind closed doors, rewriting how influence really works in the Trump orbit. So before we dig in, I want to ask, which country are you watching from tonight? Because this story isn't just about an American political family. It's about how power hides and who history credits when it finally reveals itself. We've seen men lead with volume and women lead with silence. But what if this time silence was the weapon? Because every insider source says the same thing. Nothing Trump's doing now happens without Melania's quiet approval. From the media reshaping his image to the new messaging targeting senior voters, moderates, and suburban women, the tone has changed. Softer, more controlled, more deliberate. And guess whose touch it bears? So tonight, we're going to peel back that curtain. We'll trace the hidden influence, the quiet meetings, the strategic moves that positioned Melania not as Trump's shadow, but as his compass. Because this isn't just about politics. It's about legacy, about a woman rewriting her place in history, about the kind of influence every generation underestimates until it's too late to ignore. They say behind every powerful man, there's a woman. But what if this time she's not behind him at all? Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover isn't gossip. It's the move they didn't want you to see. And once you do, you'll understand why Melania Trump might just be the quietest force in American politics today. It's been hiding in plain sight right in front of us. For months, people have wondered why Melania Trump has been so quiet, so absent from the chaos swirling around Donald Trump's comeback. But the truth is, silence was her strategy. While pundits called her disengaged, she was planning, and now we're starting to see the pieces come together. According to multiple insiders and reports from outlets like the New York Post, Melania has been laying the groundwork for something far bigger than a ceremonial return to the campaign trail. She's been building a brand, a platform, and yes, a new kind of influence. Behind the scenes, Melania has been in talks with top producers about a documentary deal, not a tabloid-style biography, but a carefully crafted narrative about power, privacy, and what it takes to survive life inside the Trump orbit. And people close to her say she's calling the shots herself, controlling how she's portrayed, how the story unfolds, and when it's released. At the same time, Melania has reportedly reactivated her contacts in high-end fundraising circles. Manhattan, Palm Beach, Geneva, the kind of donors who don't write checks because of politics, but because of relationships. And according to the Post, it's Melania's presence that's drawing them back in, not Trump's. One campaign aide was quoted saying, when Melania shows up, people open their wallets. She makes the chaos look like control. And that's the key. Control, because Melania's moves are quiet, deliberate, and deeply calculated. She's not just helping Trump raise money, she's rebranding him. Think about it. Gone are the wild speeches about revenge and rage. In their place, we're seeing softer tones, talk of family, faith, redemption. That's not coincidence, that's curation. And sources from inside the Trump team say Melania has been pushing for an image shift, telling advisors that voters don't want more drama, they want dignity. She's been choosing which interviews he takes, advising him to avoid certain networks, and encouraging more presidential appearances at cultural and charity events. In other words, Melania has become what campaign insiders are calling the filter, the quiet strategist who decides which version of Donald Trump America gets to see. And while her husband thrives on spectacle, Melania thrives on structure. She's the balance to the chaos, the counterweight that makes the comeback look inevitable instead of improvised. For years, the narrative painted her as distant, disinterested, detached, but now we see it differently. She wasn't retreating, she was recalibrating, because this isn't the same Melania we saw in the White House. This is Melania 2.0, part first lady, part brand manager, part power broker. And the shift is clear. From silent spouse to strategic partner, she's no longer standing behind Trump. She's standing beside him. And quietly, methodically, she's shaping the comeback that could redefine not just his legacy, but hers. And if history has taught us anything, it's this. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. History loves to tell us that power has a shape, that it wears a suit, stands at a podium, and carries the title, Mr. President. But if you look closely, the real architects of history rarely stand in the spotlight. They stand just behind it. For more than 2 centuries, first ladies have played that quiet role, shaping, guiding, influencing, all while the cameras focused on someone else. Eleanor Roosevelt changed the moral voice of America, yet she was called too opinionated. Jackie Kennedy softened the image of power, making politics feel poetic. Nancy Reagan's astrology consultations quietly steered her husband's schedule and diplomatic tone. Hillary Clinton turned policy into partnership, redefining what support looked like in politics. But Melania Trump is rewriting that playbook altogether, because for the first time in modern history, a former first lady isn't just standing beside her husband's political comeback. She's leading it. She saw her role not through rallies or speeches, but through strategy, image, and precision. While Trump's rhetoric ignites, Melania's restraint recalibrates. She's turned her absence into mystique. Her privacy, once mocked, has become her greatest power. This is the ultimate gender power reversal. The man who built his empire on attention now relies on the woman who mastered silence. And that's the beauty of her design. Quiet influence wrapped in grace. She's not demanding the spotlight, she's controlling where it shines. Political historians are starting to call this the Melania effect, a form of feminine political power that doesn't confront, it curates. She's doing what generations of women have always done in private spaces, guiding the direction, shaping the tone, ensuring the legacy. But she's doing it on a global stage. It's a shift that unsettles the traditional script because we've been conditioned to see power as loud, masculine, dominant. But here comes Melania, elegant, composed, unreadable, and suddenly that very silence is being interpreted as strategy. Insiders say even Trump listens differently when she speaks. One aide reportedly said, "She doesn't say much, but when she does, he listens because she's usually right." And that's what makes this transformation so profound. Melania isn't competing with her husband's power. She's redefining it. If you thought the power seat was his alone, maybe you missed who really turned the key. Because while the world debates Trump's next move, Melania may have already made it. And that's the thing about quiet revolutions. You never see them coming until they've already changed everything. You can see Melania's fingerprints now, not just on image or branding, but on policy and diplomacy itself. It's subtle, deliberate, and deeply intentional. The kind of influence that doesn't announce itself but arrives. Take Ukraine, for example. When reports surfaced that she had privately urged a more measured diplomatic tone between Washington and Kyiv, insiders brushed it off as family talk. But weeks later, Trump's statements about Europe softened. His language turned from burden to balance. Coincidence? Maybe. But those close to him say that Melania had been quietly advising him to think legacy, not leverage. And it's not just foreign policy. Her revival of the BE Best initiative, the anti-bullying and youth well-being campaign she championed as First Lady, tells you everything about her new direction. Back then, it was mocked and overshadowed by scandal and irony. But this time, it's returning with new depth, focused on digital privacy, online ethics, and mental health in a post-pandemic world. And here's what's fascinating. Melania's version of Be Best 2.0 isn't about politics. It's about permanence. It's her way of saying, I may not run for office, but I'll still shape what this country talks about. Behind closed doors, she's been meeting with educators, mental health advocates, and children's organizations. And according to People magazine, she's doing it on her own terms. No campaign cameras, no press releases, just quiet coordination. She's using the soft power of empathy, the kind of influence that doesn't trend but endures. And in a political world addicted to noise, that silence has become her strategy. Because every time Melania steps out now, whether it's at a fundraiser, a private meeting, or a state event, it's calculated. Her wardrobe, her tone, even her body language are part of a message. This isn't 2016. This is a woman who's chosen to matter. Politics aside, this is someone deciding they will matter whether you noticed or not. That's the essence of power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that outlasts. You can see it in how Trump's inner circle talks about her now. They call her the quiet influence, the reset button, the one who can calm the storm. Because while he rallies the base, she rebuilds the bridge. While he talks about vengeance, she talks about vision. And maybe that's why the campaign feels different this time. It's not just a comeback, it's a restoration, a return not just to the fight for power, but to the image of control. Melania's influence has moved beyond fashion and formality. It's diplomacy by demeanor, power by persuasion. And in a world where chaos wins headlines, she's proving that calm can still win hearts. The truth is, sometimes the most effective negotiator in the room is the one who doesn't need to raise her voice to change the tone. Behind every great comeback, there's a strategy most people never see. And in Donald Trump's case, that strategy might just be spelled Melania. Because while the public fixates on the noise of the rallies, the courtrooms, the headlines, Melania is playing the long game. She's not just stepping back into public life for nostalgia, she's stepping in as the closer. Let's start with the fundraising. According to campaign insiders, major donors, the kind who write seven-figure checks, have quietly returned to the table after Melania reemerged. She's become the face of reassurance, the symbol of refinement amid Trump's chaos. Ensuring her presence at a dinner or gala instantly changes the tone from combat to composure. One former RNC advisor put it perfectly. When Melania walks in, the room stops talking about Trump's problems and starts talking about his potential. That's not coincidence. That's choreography. Because this is how Melania operates, not by arguing, but by rebranding. And her timing couldn't be sharper. The campaign knows that its path back to the White House runs through senior voters, people who value family, stability, and legacy. And who better to sell that vision than the woman who embodies it? While Trump reignites his base with outrage, Melania softens his edges with elegance. It's the yin to his roar, the balance that keeps the message from tipping into madness. Her influence isn't loud, but it's everywhere, from the new campaign visuals in cleaner, more dignified fonts to the recent push for heritage and family-first messaging. Her fingerprints are all over the brand. Even the tone of Trump's public appearances has shifted subtly. Fewer late-night posts, more scripted remarks about faith, history, and unity. That's Melania's doing. The quiet strategist who understands that the most powerful message is often restraint. And here's the emotional truth. When the power behind the power steps forward, your idea of leadership changes too, because we've been taught to think leadership looks like command, like volume and visibility, but Melania's redefining it as composure, as knowing when not to speak, when not to react, when not to crumble. And it's working. Senior voters are responding to that steadiness, to the image of a couple that looks like stability after years of political whiplash. But make no mistake, this isn't just about Melania supporting Trump's return. This is about Melania protecting her own legacy, her future, her sons, her family's story. She's crafting something much bigger than another campaign. She's crafting the final chapter of the Trump narrative, one where the scandal gives way to symbolism and the chaos gives way to control. But here's the question you have to ask yourself, the one that keeps me up at night. The real question isn't just who's influencing them, it's who they're preparing you to trust. Because every comeback story has an architect. And sometimes the architect isn't the one holding the microphone wide, it's the one holding the map. This part of the story, this shift in power, means the most to one group in particular. You, the generation that's seen it all, the one that's lived through leaders who shouted, promised, rose, and fell. Because when you've spent decades watching history repeat itself, you start to see patterns the younger crowd misses. You start to know the difference between noise and influence. And that's why this moment, Melania's quiet emergence, hits differently for seniors, for legacy voters, for those who care not just about winning elections, but about what's left afterward. Because whether you love or loathe Donald Trump, you can feel something changing in the air. This isn't about another campaign. It's about control, about image, and about trust. The kind of trust that older Americans value more than any slogan. Trust that's earned through steadiness, dignity, and moral restraint. Melania is playing to that instinct. Her calm, her distance, her refusal to engage in chaos. That's not detachment, that's design. She knows that seniors, the heart of the voting bloc, aren't moved by viral moments. They're moved by something deeper, by the appearance of order, family, and tradition. And here's the thing, that's not manipulation, it's understanding. Because when you've lived through as much as you have, wars, recessions, scandals, crises, you stop being impressed by outrage. You start longing for balance. Melania's quiet rise is more than image management. It's a reflection of how politics is changing before our eyes. For decades, women in power were told to be louder, tougher, more aggressive, to act like the men they worked beside. But Melania is doing something that turns that rule upside down. She's reclaiming soft power, influence through grace, persuasion through silence, command through presence. And I'll tell you this from experience. I've known women who stood quietly in the back of the room. Then one day they stepped forward and everything shifted. The conversation changed, the decisions changed, the entire room changed. That's what we're watching now. This isn't just a Trump comeback. It's a cultural reckoning with how we perceive strength, because maybe the real strength isn't in the shouting. Maybe it's in the stillness that makes everyone else stop and listen. And that's why Melania's influence is resonating so deeply with older generations. You know what it means to lead with calm, to speak with purpose, to protect what matters more than applause. So as the world fixates on who's yelling the loudest, you're looking for who's leading the quietest. Because while the loud voices fight for headlines, you want someone fighting for what matters. There's another side to the story, one the headlines won't linger on, but the consequences might. Because for every moment of grace and precision in Melania's rise, there's a shadow forming just beneath it. You see, when power gets quiet, it also gets harder to trace. Melania's influence might look elegant from the outside, poised, deliberate, dignified, but behind that calm is something more complex. Because when one person becomes the silent strategist, the brand manager, the diplomat, and the gatekeeper, you start to wonder who's keeping watch on them. That's the risk we rarely talk about. The hidden cost of blurred lines. When the spouse becomes the strategist, who holds them accountable? In the old political model, lines were clear. The leader led, the family supported, and the advisors advised. But in the new world of family brand politics, those roles dissolve into one another. Melania isn't just influencing policy, she's shaping perception. And perception is the currency of power. It's one thing for a political partner to advise in private. It's another when that partner starts steering the machine from within, shielded from scrutiny, protected by personal loyalty instead of public oversight. Because the truth is, Melania answers to no one but Donald. She's not elected. She's not appointed. She's not accountable to the public. And yet her words, her image, her choices ripple into policy, into strategy, into how millions perceive reality. It's a quiet concentration of influence, the kind that doesn't announce itself but reshapes everything it touches. And it's not just Melania. It's the model, the brand politics model, where family becomes franchise, where private loyalty begins to outweigh public responsibility. When your leader's inner circle isn't made of statesmen, but of relatives, decision-making starts looking less like democracy and more like dynasty. And that's where this gets dangerous, because you thought you were being promised service, stability, order, and protection. But maybe what's really being sold is loyalty. Loyalty to the image, the name, the legacy, not necessarily to the people. That's the part they don't say out loud. Influence isn't always noble and control isn't always clean. And while Melania may bring calm to the storm, too much quiet power can become its own kind of chaos. Because history has shown that every time power hides behind beauty, charm, or silence, it becomes nearly impossible to question. So the real challenge isn't whether Melania's influence helps Trump, it's whether it helps us, whether this version of leadership still belongs to the people or if it now belongs to the brand. Because if we can't see where the power really flows, then maybe for the first time we're not meant to. Here's what to watch for next. Because Melania's quiet rise isn't finished, it's just beginning. The first signal will come in the form of something that looks harmless, a documentary. According to producers close to the project, Melania has been negotiating behind the scenes for months to craft her own story, a story about resilience, motherhood, image, and reinvention. But make no mistake, this isn't nostalgia, it's strategy. It's the official rollout of Melania the Architect. Expect the tone to feel personal, even fragile, but watch the details, the language, the editing, the soundtrack. They'll all be designed to shift how the world sees her, from ornamental to operational, from accessory to asset. Then there's her role inside Trump's organization. Reports say she's taking a more direct hand in personnel and communications decisions, vetting who gets access, who stays in his orbit, and who gets shut out. That's not micromanagement, that's consolidation. And soon you'll start to see her face in places it rarely appeared before. Not at rallies, but at refined events, veterans fundraisers, women's leadership panels, and international charity galas. Because that's where she wins hearts, not in crowds, but in rooms that decide funding, influence, and perception. Watch the media framing too. Already, some outlets have quietly stopped calling her former First Lady and started using words like partner, advisor, and strategist. The titles are changing, and so is the story. And here's why you should care. Because when the face changes, the power doesn't always budge. Sometimes it just learns how to smile differently. We've entered a new kind of leadership era, one where families function like firms and image is as critical as ideology, where the idea of one leader is replaced by a network of influence operating under a single name. And that's where you come in. You've built your life on believing one person should lead, one voice should answer, one figure should be accountable. But now you're watching many lead, and that changes the rules. It means responsibility gets blurred, decisions become harder to trace, and the trust you once placed in a single elected leader now gets spread among people you never voted for. So as Melania steps forward, elegant, calm, strategic, stay vigilant. Some of it might be real, but the power behind it is still politics. And the next time you see her walk into the frame, remember, the question isn't how much she influences, it's how quietly. Because quiet power isn't invisible, it's just waiting for everyone else to stop clapping long enough to notice. You built your life on the promise that leadership meant service, that power was a responsibility, not a right. Don't let this season steal that meaning, because politics at its best was supposed to be about truth, not theater, about leaders serving people, not people serving brands. And yet, here we are, watching influence move behind curtains, watching strategy replace sincerity, and watching power reshape itself in silence. Melania's rise, elegant, measured, deliberate, reminds us how power always adapts. When the spotlight grows too harsh, it doesn't disappear. It simply moves to a quieter corner of the stage. And that's why you have to stay aware. Ask who's really behind the curtain. Ask who's writing the script, not just reading the lines. Because in an age where influence hides in image and loyalty looks a lot like leadership, it's easy to forget who the story is supposed to serve. You deserve leaders who are transparent, not theatrical, who speak plainly, not strategically, who earn trust through service, not through spectacle. And yes, maybe Melania's quiet control feels refreshing compared to the noise. Maybe her grace feels like relief after years of chaos. But power, even polished, is still power, and it must always be watched. So don't hand your trust away without proof. Don't confuse composure for integrity, and don't let history rewrite itself while you're still living it. Because this isn't just a story about a woman stepping into influence. It's about a country redefining what leadership even looks like. And if we forget that leadership is supposed to serve, not sell, then we lose more than politics. We lose purpose. So stay aware, stay thoughtful, and remember, the strongest form of power is the one that doesn't have to be seen to shape the future.